Hi, Sue.
Hi,
Um,
Darren.
yeah. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your trip to to the USA and Canada?
Yes, certainly can. Thank you very much for asking me to talk about it. Um, so I went to last September. I went to the US and Canada for 6 weeks. I received a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust fellowship, which gives grants to people in the UK to travel anywhere in the world. Um, to research, I think something that they're particularly interested in. And my background is social work and managing direct management of services. And I'm now semi-retired. Um, and in my retirement, I've spent time developing support for people, mostly with self-advocates on sexuality and relationships. So I do a lot of training with staff, self-advocates, family members, anybody who will listen really, um, to try and raise awareness of the importance of relationships with people. And I was particularly worried about the issue of people being sexually abused in situations where they didn't have the information to understand that was what was happening to them. And so I wanted to go to Canada and America to explore this further, and to find out if they were doing things that we weren't. And the idea of the fellowships is that you come back to the UK and use your learning to inspire other people. So this is the stage that I'm at. I've written a report, and it's now being disseminated, and it's my job to explain to people that they're doing some things in America and Canada that maybe we can learn from.
The only thing is um, with some of our members is why you got funded through, say, Winston Churchill Trust, when Winston Churchill actually was into eugenics and sterilization of
Yeah.
people with learning disabilities.
Yes, yes. So I was very conscious of that, and you particularly helped me with that because, I remember speaking to you about it right at the very beginning, and um, and that was one of the things that you brought up, and I think it's come up more recently, hasn't it, with the Black Lives Matters
Yeah,
issues, and his part in that, and actually the Churchill Fellowship has looked at that, and quite rightly they've acknowledged um, past ideas which contributed to some very negative lives for people. So what I would, I mean, sort of justifying taking the money and discussing it with people from the fellowship is that things were done and felt and said in that era that probably if those people were alive today with the knowledge and understanding that we now have would be saying very different things. So whilst all of that stuff about eugenics was so wrong, um, and what the Churchill Fellowship is saying, that doesn't negate some of the very positive things that he did. He still saved us in the war, didn't he, from Hitler. And so, whilst it is wrong that he developed eugenics, and he actually said that all people with a learning disability should be sterilised, I think it's really good that I went to do something that was exactly the opposite with his money.
I just want to make sure that people with learning disabilities and autism understand all that.
Yeah, I think that's I think a really important point to make. Yeah.
Questions is uh, knowing for people with learning disabilities to talk about sex is difficult, emotional, and embarrassing, and sometimes awkward
Mm.
subject to talk about in the UK, unlike, say, the USA and Canada, where they're more open to such matters. What have you learned to get around this?
Mm. Well, the interesting thing was that I found that it was actually universal, that whilst people in America they're portrayed as, you know, being more open, but I didn't actually find that. I found that everywhere I went, people were saying that there were barriers to discussions. And I had an opportunity to do some training in America. And there were people on the training course from all over, from different states. And there were some states, particularly in the Midwest, where, because it's such a big place, isn't it? I think that's one of the things, you know, compared to us, the USA is huge. And certainly the Midwest states, they are so repressed in relation to sexuality that they were telling me that they were doing training courses with people with a learning disability about sexual relationships, and they weren't even allowed to talk about sex, because in those states it's all about abstinence until you're married, so that people aren't getting the information. So, you know, I think it varies so much. I think in Canada, people are much more like, their attitude is much more like the British attitude, you know, because,
Yeah.
you know, their history is so closely aligned to ours more recently. And so, you know, I found that they really understood where we were coming from. However, although there's no easy answer to your question, I learned about the importance of doing it gradually. So don't go in there and just start talking about sex, because people will reel. This is about things that are important to everybody. So relationships, connectivity, feeling a sense of belonging, understanding your body. Those are things that most people are interested in. So if you start talking about it very gradually, I think it works. And also, one of the big differences in America and Canada was organisations being very committed to a trauma-informed approach. So that's been really aware that many people with a learning disabilities have experienced negative impact in relation to the kind of relationship that they've had, the inappropriateness of relationships, not having information, not having their rights met. And we need to be very aware of this when we're engaging in conversations with them. That sometimes things can be, you know, upsetting, remind them of things that have happened. So it's really important to bear that in mind when we're having conversations or doing training. But I came across a couple of organisations in Vancouver that I think you probably read about in the report. And what they did was they worked with an organisation who were doing innovation thinking called Inward Forward. And they were thinking about how does anybody else learn about relationships? So yes, some people learn formally, and more in the UK we're going to be doing that in schools, but often it's just things like having a conversation with your mates down the pub. So they thought, how can we do something similar? So they came up with some much more ordinary ways of people talking about relationships. So one of them is they have monthly pizza parties. So everybody just gets together, eats pizza, the sexual health services are there, people from social care are there, and they have a chat about different aspects of relationships and sexuality. And then I went to a group who meet in different cafes and restaurants, and they do a similar thing. And whilst they're talking, their staff or their family members are having a discussion in another room. So it's doing things that are much more ordinary seems to work. And I think this is why it's important for staff members to feel comfortable talking about it, because these conversations need to happen when people want them to happen, not necessarily just in a classroom. So, you know, there are sexual messages all around us every day, aren't there, in adverts, on soap operas, you know, so trying to get people when they're watching EastEnders or Coronation Street and something, because there are lots of sexual messages in all of these programmes. So being able to have those conversations is really, really important, well as formal.
Yeah, I suppose that a lot of these things, like you're just saying about in TV programs and and in say opera and drama, maybe getting some people with learning disabilities in those programs.
Absolutely. Did you see the A Word? Did you watch the A Word?
Do you know what? It, by the time it's on, I'm already I'm in bed.
That was really good. That was because we've been saying this for some time, that it's really important to have images of people in soap operas. And I know that there's somebody with a learning disability in Coronation. But the A Word was just really good because it showed two people with a learning disability getting married. And it wasn't just focusing on that story, it was very much part of the general storyline. But I think you're right, the more people who are in mainstream TV dramas, the better.
I want to get on to the next question. Your work with Unite in the Northwest, and you provide training around relationships and sex. Would you consider providing training around relationships and sex in the south of England?
Yeah, yes, I would. I also work with supported loving. I think you've probably heard of supported loving,
Yes, I
haven't
know
you? So
supported housing. Yeah, they're
yeah,
great.
so I'm part of that group. So we're a national network of people who do very similar work, and it's run by Claire Bates,
Yes.
who works at Wizard, and Choice Support. And so the work that I do in the Northwest is mostly with self-advocates as co-trainers, and there are other people who do similar works. There aren't hundreds of us, but there's a growing network of people who are interested. I think there are 400 members now in supported loving. So I suppose what I say is, if somebody contacted me from Kent, for instance, I would be looking for other people in the network who would maybe be able to do that work locally, because I think they have local knowledge, and they are able to, put you in touch with people, and also give ongoing support if people do have the training. So I think that's a better way of doing it. We have been looking at doing online training, but I think that's quite difficult for this subject, because we do a lot of hands-on activities, and doing that online might create challenges.
Yeah, I know that's a bit difficult, especially in these circumstances, what we, you know, with the
Yeah,
COVID-19 and everything.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
very difficult.
absolutely. But we are getting better at Zoom, aren't we?
Yeah, uh, a lot of our members are on Zoom, and
Yeah,
it's great that you went to USA and Canada, and I hope you got a lot out of it, as I did, and wanted to put into practice what I learned there to put and adapt it in the UK. When I went to America and Canada, my head was exploding with ideas when I went. Did you have an explosive ideas when you came back? I'm
that's a
sorry
brilliant
about that.
question.
I
That's
know
a
it's
brilliant
fun.
question, Gary. You're absolutely right. Yes, my head was completely full, and spinning with new ideas. And I suppose one of the good things is having time after you get back to try and organise the explosion in your head, and having to write a report helped with that, because it made me put the ideas into some kind of clearer format, and try and prioritise what was most important. Um, so I think I've just tried to think of, to answer the question, tried to think of the things that were most important, that I thought would make a difference. So I think there's another question about sexual self-advocacy, but sexual self-advocacy, which is the merging of thinking about sexual rights with self-advocacy, is one that's talked to lots of self-advocates. So on the journey, which was, I haven't explained this, but it was mostly in the east of the US, so New England, and then I went from the east coast to the west coast of Canada. So most of the time was spent in Canada. So it was a very, very long journey. And I met lots of self-advocates. I met researchers, people who provide services to people with learning disability, people from universal services. So there was a very wide range of people, probably too wide in hindsight. So lots of people were talking to me about self-advocacy. I saw how self-advocacy works in the US and Canada, and there are differences, aren't there, between there?
Yeah, they're very much different.
Yeah, and so, you know, sexual self-advocacy came across as really significant and something that I think we could do about. And it was where I got my ideas from initially, was from talking to self-advocates here. They're the people who have kind of driven the work. They were the ones who were saying to me, we need to do something about this in Lancashire. So I wanted to find out whether it was similar elsewhere. But obviously, you know, I was looking at safeguarding and the fact that people are sexually abused here. The people with learning disability are 4 times more likely to be sexually abused than people who don't have a learning disability in the UK. That statistic is absolutely appalling, and you know, I think we should be doing something about it. We need to be shouting loudly that this is happening, because I think it's very hidden at the moment. And I found that both in the US and Canada, they were doing so much more about prevention. And I think we wait for things to go wrong. You know, we know it happens, and we respond when things go wrong, which is the wrong way around. We should be doing something before. And so, you know, I was really pleased to find that they do much more thinking about, well, what can we do to prevent this? And then they give responsibility to people to do something about it. And I think that's what we should be doing.
Sexual abuse happens to people with learning disabilities in the UK, but hardly gets a mention as much as abuse of non-disabled people. What did you learn about the use of education in the USA and Canada? I think you mainly answered most of it.
Not in the public eye very much, and the information isn't out there. I think people don't hear it, so people aren't aware. And particularly for people with a learning disability, what that is meaning is that they don't always think that they're going to be believed if they disclose sexual abuse. So I think we need to, it's all part of raising awareness and talking much more about the fact that this is happening, and giving safeguarding, because there is a real focus on safeguarding in social and healthcare. So it's not that people aren't concerned about the issues, but we've got a kind of culture of fear around safeguarding. The staff that I talk to are concerned that they might be blamed if they do something wrong, so they tend to protect people. So Dave Hinsberger talks about the fact that, you know, we have this kind of prison of protection around people, actually, which kind of puts them in cotton wool or bubble wraps them, but doesn't give them the tools to actually be safe. So we need to be focusing more on supporting people to know how to be safe, and recognising when abusive things are happening to them, because often people are being touched inappropriately or things are happening to them, but they have no idea that that is wrong, and it amounts to abuse. So there's lots of work that we need to be doing with people to raise awareness, and to put people with a learning disability, as you said, in television programs, so that people actually, and promotion, when we're doing promotion about staying safe, often it's mainstream, but it doesn't include people with a learning disability. So things like that would make a difference, and just beginning to talk more about it.
Next question is there going to be any research with, say, in the EU, Australia and New Zealand about sexual safety and self-advocacy?
Yes, there is. There have been a number of EU projects. One that was completed in 2015, I think it was, which was run by the International Planned Parenthood Federation, and that was about it was called Keep Me Safe. And it created some really good teaching materials. So it's all about helping people to be much safer in relationships, and the Family Planning Association in the UK was involved in that. And then more recently there's been a project called Trace, which was training in sexual education for people with disabilities, and they produced some train the trainer materials. But I don't know going forward what the impact of Brexit will be on collaborative working and our involvement in that. Obviously, this is something, you know, being involved in global work is really important, because we learn from each other and they learn from us. So, you know, I hope that it doesn't stop. And in Australia, Patsy Frawley, who works at Deakin University in Melbourne, she's done some really good work around this. She's done a project called Respectful Lives, which involves self-advocates in telling their story, and then that's used for training. And actually, just this morning, I had contact from the university asking me to be involved in some of the research that they're doing there. And there's been similar work in New Zealand about staff and how staff can provide good support for people around this. So I think, you know, that globe, hopefully we'll get invited to Australia, Gary. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Well, that'll be fine. I haven't been to Australia
Go
nor New Zealand. Could self-advocacy groups, sexual health services, National Health Service, and social care services, researchers, trainers work together?
Yes,
On
absolutely. So,
what you learned and put into practice?
yes, Gary, I think this is actually the crux of everything that we've been talking about. There have been a number of research projects around this by the NDTI, Tizard Centre in the UK, and they nearly all, as most things do, say that we should all be working together. And I think this is the only way that we're going to get progress, because some of the things that need to happen as a result of what we've been talking about already exist. So the Care Act is, you know, very clear about prevention should be a strand of safeguarding, but it's not actually happening. So we need to talk to people at a level that can foster change, to say, you know, you've got it in writing, this is what should be happening, but it actually isn't. And I think there are resources around, it's the way they're used. So there are lots of resources in safeguarding, but none of it tends to go to prevention. So I think we need to, you know, have conversations about how we can do that. And sometimes we are duplicating things. I think together, I'm sure that we can come up with a better way of thinking about relationships and sexuality for people with learning disabilities, because there's a groundswell, I think, and sexual self-advocacy is going to contribute to that, because there are more and more self-advocates talking about sex, and often when I'm training, what I find is that the self-advocates feel much more comfortable talking about it. It tends to be professionals and staff who are the most embarrassed. So I hope that, and I've learned so much from self-advocates, so I think their involvement in the training process really seems to help. So the short answer is yes, I think we need to be getting together. You're really good at that. You know, LD England is really good at that. So, you know, I would be looking to you to say, are there some other ways that we can, you know, do this collaboration, maybe using your contacts to help that happen. And I'm more than happy to share my experiences in America and Canada with other people to just fire that up.
Positive after this.
Yeah, I think it's always important when you go somewhere else to pick out the positives about the UK, and there were a couple of things that I learned that I think we should be really proud of. The first one is that we're so much better at accessible information. So I found that there were places, both in America and Canada, although they were quite good at graphic facilitation, they were easy read information. So lots of the information wasn't in easy read at all, and it wasn't unified. I think we've got a much better system here. The other thing is that people had fewer opportunities to make friends. So we've set up a number of dating and friendship agencies in the UK, and I didn't find any at all. There was one that had existed, but it not for very long. And they were really so worried about litigation and people suing them that it stopped them doing it. So they were quite envious of the work that we do. And also they weren't as good as us at networking. So things were happening in one state that people didn't know about. And although we're a much smaller country, I think we have got better at telling people across county boundaries what's going on. So, you know, people did say to me that they were quite envious of some of the things that are going on in the UK. So I think we should be quite proud of that.
Great. I think that's a positive note to end on.